Greetings. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Speaking, it is Lunga, Mr. Arthur Kumala. Hope you are having a great time, having a great day. It is that time again in the week where we come to you and share great topics, confrontational topics that are going to help transform and empower you. And yes, this is still a safe space for you and I to inspire, equip, and to empower one another into a transformative living, a living that will make you be a better person. And yes, uh, it's that time again. I'm a bit fatigued, but yeah, let's do it. We committed to this, so let's go. Let's get to it. Today, I would like us to talk on a very huge thing that we overlook. I would like us to talk on self-sabotage. I'd like us to look at that self-sabotage and how it works, and how it limits people. But before we get to anything around it, let me do this, or let me say this disclaimer. What makes people to fail, or what makes people to result to self-sabotage, it is people don't fail because they lack motivation. That's the first thing I'd like you to know. People do not fail because they lack motivation, but people fail because their current identity cannot sustain the life they want. People fail because their current identity cannot sustain the life they want. A lot of the people, they do not have a problem of forecasting or having a vision of where they want to be, but a lot of people have a problem of the identity that cannot sustain the lifestyle or the life they want. I know a lot of people who desire to live an upright life, but they cannot live that upright life because the identity they have cannot sustain that. The habits they've taught themselves cannot sustain that. The pattern that they live their life with cannot sustain that life. And again, people do not fail because they lack motivation, but people fail because the identity they have cannot sustain the life they want. I want you to think on that for a moment. That what actually makes you fail, it is not a lot of things, but it is the identity that cannot sustain the life you want. And as today we are going to talk about one of the identity patterns that a lot of people have adopted as part of their lives that is busy destroying their lives. Again, if you are not a person who's willing to have confrontational conversations, this is not a space for you, because here we confront. Here we go hard on serious topic. We go hard on topics that are going to transform you, that are going to make you look into the life you want to live, that are going to change the way you look and view things. And today, as I said earlier on, that we'll be talking on self-sabotage. And as you know, I've prepared a couple of notes that are going to help me to unpack this issue or this topic for today. So if ever you now and then see me looking at a different direction, just know that I'm checking my notes so that I could be on. I don't want to be off topic and be. I've prepared a couple of notes. So before we go far with our topic, I would like us to first look at what self-sabotage really is. What is self-sabotage? At its core, what is self-sabotage? Self-sabotage, it is the act of protecting a familiar identity even when that identity is limiting or painful. I'll say it again. Self-sabotage, among all the other things you know about self-sabotage, what self-sabotage truly is, it is protecting a familiar identity even when that identity is limiting or painful. So whatever you put as an excuse, what you are actually doing at its core, you are protecting a familiar identity even when that identity is limiting or painful. Have you ever came across a person who is always repeatedly told that stop doing this, stop behaving this way because this is limiting you, or this is not taking you where you want to be? And they are busy making excuses or giving out reasons why they behave the way they behave. What that person is actually doing, they are practicing what we call self-sabotage, because self-sabotage at its core, it is the act of protecting a familiar identity even when that identity is limiting or painful. Have you ever came across a person who says, I'm behaving the way I'm behaving because I'm resembling the people from my own family? Into yasekhaya, like, I'm behaving the way how the people from my family behave. A lot of times those behaviors that we embrace, that we categorize as our identity, as a thing that identifies with us or gives us who we are as an identifier. A lot of those behaviors, many of them, we are just basically protecting a familiar identity that we have resembled with over transformation. We are protecting something over, progression, being a better person and a transform individual. So, at its core, the first and important point that I would like you to note and know is that what self sabotage really is, it is beyond just a cliche, but it is protecting a familiar identity even when that identity is limiting or it is painful. So, we know a lot of people who resist growth, who resist success, who resist change, because the three things that I've mentioned: growth, success, change. We love them and we embrace them as beautiful concepts and beautiful things for one to actually attain as an individual. But let us be honest, these things are challenging more than we put them. We downscale them for the responsibility that they come with. Think about growth. Growth threatens the current sense of self. What growth really does. Whenever someone is experiencing growth in their life, what they're experiencing, part of the good thing that comes with growth, they're also experiencing the threat that comes with the sense of self. Because growth requires you to stretch beyond who you really are and who you familiarize yourself to be. And one thing about success that success really does, success, I've always said this, success always introduces responsibility more than anything. Success, rather than introducing relief, rather than introducing splendor and joy, but one of the biggest things success truly introduces, it is responsibility. And the last thing that I mentioned is change. One of the things that makes change to be so hard and have people result into self sabotage is because change exposes old wounds, fears, and unresolved beliefs. Change introduces exposure to old wounds, fears, and unresolved beliefs. So, whenever we see people resisting change, whenever we see people resisting growth, whenever we see people resisting success, in all actual facts, they always use this weapon that is called self sabotage because they want to remain in the comfortability of their own identity. They want to remain in the comfortability and the calmness of their own identity. And remember, we said in 2026, we are not just going to sit back and expect things to happen. We are going to be the drivers of change. So that was the first point. What is, in actual fact, self-sabotage? So if ever you find yourself resisting growth, resisting success, resisting change, just know that you are protecting a familiar identity, even when that identity is limiting or painful. If you find yourself resisting growth, resisting success, resisting change, know that you are protecting a familiar identity. That's the core of it. It's not just change that is coming that you're resisting. You're protecting a familiar identity. And unfortunately, these three things that we said we are going for in 2026, they call you to growth, they call you to success, they call you to change. But the second point that is important around self sabotage is that self sabotage, it or maybe let's talk about what's common around self sabotage, so that you could know if you are sabotaging yourself, so that we do not have a blanket approach to this topic. What is common or common forms of self sabotage? One of the things that is at the top of the list of self-sabotage. I think I've done a video before on this, but I will do it again if I haven't. But I do know that I've mentioned it in some of the previous videos that we've had. Procrastination, it is disguised as preparation when you're self-sabotaging. A lot of time we disguise procrastination as preparation. And I remember I mentioned this, I said, a lot of times we procrastinate and call it on waiting on the Lord. We call procrastination as waiting on the Lord. Even when we are protecting a familiar identity, we then call it preparation. But in actual fact, it is procrastination. waiting for that perfect moment, perfect plan, perfect mood, perfect timing. It can never be perfect. Think about this. Each and every day when you go to sleep and you wake up, you go to sleep and you wake up, you are drawing closer and closer to the last day on earth. Think about it. And when will that perfect moment, perfect plan, perfect mood, perfect time be, if not now? In closing my first book, No One Owes You Anything, I said maybe we should use the moment we have now because we do not know what the tomorrow holds, or will we even be in that tomorrow. And a lot of times we disguise self-sabotage as procrastination and we call it preparation. Don't get me wrong, it is very important to plan our things out. It's one of the things I talked on one of the tips to help you self-develop in 2026. I talked on preparation. But we should also be aware that we do not over-prepare until we reach a state of sabotaging ourselves and procrastination. The second point that normally disguises itself as a good reason why one can self-sabotage, it is perfectionism. I'm guilty of that myself sometimes. I know that I do raise the standard so high that starting feels impossible. I do it a lot of times. Raising the standard so high that starting almost feels impossible, where you want the things to be so perfect that the standard is too high to be reached. Sometimes that works as self-sabotage. Sometimes we self-sabotage as overthinking. I'm also guilty of that again. It happens where you overthink, where you endlessly analyze to avoid emotional risk. You endlessly analyze to avoid emotional risk. We do that a lot of times, and we do not see even when we have reached a point where we are self-sabotaging. We are not serving. We're not doing a good. We are not doing justice to ourselves and our dreams. And one of the other example or common factors for self-sabotage, it is self-doubt narratives, where we are always like, I'm not ready, I'm not fully prepared, this is not the right time, I don't know much that I need to know about this. And we do a lot of this, the self-doubt thing, whenever we should start something that is important and of value to us. I know a lot of people who should have started their business 5 years ago, they haven't. And now that they've started them, they are working as if they are rushing against time because they are aware that they wasted a lot of times doubting themselves. Now that they've been able to collect enough courage to start, they are now working as if they are working behind schedule. Because I think of the time they wasted self-doubting themselves. And the last thing that is common around self-sabotage, it is repeating toxic patterns. Repeating toxic patterns. Same relationships, same mistakes, same outcomes, different faces. Same mistakes, same relationships, same outcomes, different faces. You repeat the same mistake and the same thing with the same relationship or a similar relationship with a different face. We always expect a different result because we have these repeating toxic patterns, repeating toxic patterns, repeating toxic patterns. Now, let us now look at how self-doubt or how self-sabotage, how self-sabotage limits people. How self-sabotage limits people. Self-sabotage doesn't just delay success, it reshapes identity. That's the first and the most painful thing it does. That it doesn't just delay success, it reshapes one's identity. It reshapes how you look at yourself, how you look at life. Because everything that should be an opportunity for growth, for success, for change, it always threatens the familiar identity that you are trying to protect. Self-sabotage always threatens the familiar identity that you are trying to protect. Hence, everything around change, growth, success will always threaten that familiarity you familiarize yourself with and you understand, because self-sabotage creates a pattern that you understand and you're familiar with. And it always keeps potential trapped. I know a lot of potential people who are potential with their music, who are potential with their gifts, their talent, their craft, but they are trapped with that same potential because they fear to move out from this familiar pattern that they familiarize themselves with, this familiar identity that is now being challenged for change, growth, and success. And a lot of time they become almost people. Do you know the person who almost makes it, who almost becomes successful, who almost becomes the big thing, who almost becomes the great musician, who almost becomes, they are almost people because they always try to protect this familiarity. They are happy with the mediocre performance. Self-sabotage. And a lot of times, self-sabotage, it creates a false personality. It creates a false personality. I know a lot of people who call themselves lazy while they are not. They're just comfortable with sabotaging themselves. I know a lot of people who call themselves who make growth and change unnatural because they've accustomed themselves to the level of the life they're living in. I know a lot of people who turn fear into a lifestyle because the common factor was for self-sabotage is that it limits potential, it limits greatness, it cages that greatness that is trapped in you. I'd be so happy one day if you could take a risk and actually go full force on all your dreams. Let me share my story because I'm also a person who has suffered from a lot of the traits that are in this list. Hence, I had to make it the way I structured this video. I myself have suffered from self-sabotage. I have set the standard once in my life so high that no one could reach it, even myself, and I had to wait for so long to reach it. I myself have been at the point where I felt I've been a victim of being a perfectionist, where it has to be perfect and nothing but perfect. I myself have been at a point whereby I, I overthink things and I overanalyze until I am disqualified even in my own plan. And actually reach a point where fear is a lifestyle. It's natural for me to adjust to fear, to adjust to familiarity, where I protect a familiar identity that I've created and built. But let me tell you, if I still hold that identity, I don't think I'd be sitting here doing this video with my phone in the background I'm in and in the room I'm in. But because I took the leap of faith and I took the leap of actually going forth for everything that I believe that I should be doing and that I should be reaching for, I'm here doing this video talking to you today. Because what self-sabotage does, it holds you to wait as if you're preparing, whereas it's in actual fact, it is procrastination. It holds you it traps you in a jail where you feel like the perfect time is coming. And the moment you'll wake up, you'll only realize you've wasted the right time for you to start doing what you should be doing. And you wasted the right time for you to go for everything and every dream you should be going for. But now I'm going to my favorite part of this video. How people can actually overcome self-sabotage. One of the worst thing I could do is to come here and to outline what self-sabotage is without giving you the actual tools to help you overcome self-sabotage. Because I would like to assume that a lot of people are aware that they are self-sabotaging. They are aware. Their heart of hearts are telling them that you're not where you're supposed to be because you're limiting yourself. So the important part, it is this one, where we get to the actual tools of how people actually can overcome self-sabotage. Now, let's take the first point. One of the first and most important things that I've done for myself to help me no longer remain in the self-sabotage zone or in the self-sabotage era, I've realized that confrontation is very important. I've realized that avoiding this confrontational conversations with myself, it would really be still sabotaging myself. Confronting who I am and confronting the bad habits and the bad person and the toxic patterns that I have in my life would really limit me. It would be no good for me to know everything I know and do nothing with it. It would be no good for me to limit myself with not going out for everything I believe I'm called to do on planet Earth. So, one of the first and important things, familiarize yourself with confrontation and redesigning. By redesigning, meaning embracing embracing new habits, embracing new habits and new patterns. I'm sure there are many videos in this channel where we are talking about how to develop progressive habits. Excuse me. Not so long ago, we were talking on how to build progressive habits. We talked on 3 things. I'll not talk about it so that you could go and watch that video. But there are ways you could redesign your life. You could redesign your pattern. You could redesign how you do things. But the first important question you should ask yourself, it is, what do I gain by staying the same? What do I gain by staying the same? What do I gain by staying the same? Remember that every sabotage has a reward. Avoiding rejection, avoiding responsibility, avoiding disappointment, avoiding being seen. There's a reward for sabotage. And a lot of people are remaining in that state for that. We sabotage ourselves by the fear we have for rejection. You are not submitting that business plan because you fear that you will be rejected. You are not embracing that change because you fear the responsibility that it comes with. You are avoiding that relationship, pursuing that relationship because you are avoiding disappointments. You are avoiding starting that dream of yours, speaking to people because you are actually avoiding to being seen. So a lot of people are remaining in procrastination because procrastination or sabotage has a reward, and unfortunately that reward is actually sabotaging you more than benefiting you. Remember when we started this video, we said, unfortunately, one of the first things that confronts self-sabotage is these 3 things: growth, success, and responsibility. Growth challenges us. Success challenges us. So let's take a couple of key points for us to build then progressive, or for us to actually build then or move from self-sabotage. One of the first things, we need to track patterns, not moods. We need to track patterns, not moods. Stop focusing on how you feel. Start focusing on what you repeat. Stop focusing on how you feel. Start focusing on what you repeat. Let me say this. We'll continuously in this channel throughout this year be talking on what you repeat, because unfortunately we are the result of what we repeat the most. We are not the result of what we say the most. We are the result of what we repeat the most, not the results of what we say the most. So stop focusing on how you feel and start focusing on what you repeat. Track patterns, not moods. Track your patterns, not your mood, not how you feel, because we are the results of what we repeat, not of what we feel. And the second point that is important for you to move from self-sabotage, it is that shrink the battles, or shrink the battlefield. What's that? Self-sabotage thrives in big, vague goals. Self-sabotage thrives in big, vague goals. So shrink the battlefields. So stop having these big dreams that before the year ends you would buy a plane. My friend, you don't even have a driver's license. I'm not throwing shades, but I'm being honest. You need to stop, you need to shrink the battlefield so that it's realistic and it's attainable. Because you're always moving around these toxic patterns, because even you're aiming, you are not aiming in a realistic approach, you're aiming in a very vague approach. Your goals are very vague. There's not even a proper plan for you of how you will attain that goal of buying an aeroplane. Not that it's impossible, no one can do it, but for you to actually have attainable goals, you need to start somewhere, and realistically so. You need to start somewhere realistically so. So shrink the battlefield. Instead of saying, I want to change my life, and instead of saying that, because you'll always say you want to change your life and always go back to your patterns, because remember, we are the results of what we do, not the results of what we say. We are the results of what we repeat, not the results of what we feel. So instead of you continuously saying, I want to change my life, what is the smallest daily action that contradicts my old identity? That's where you should start. What is the smallest daily action that contradicts my old identity? What is the smallest daily action that contradicts my old identity? And so instead of you saying, I want to change my life, change your daily action that contradicts my old identity. That's the very important thing. So you shrink your goals. Instead of going around saying, I'm going to change 2026, new year, new me, you're not going to do that this year. But what you're going to do, you're going to change your daily small actions that you do that are contradicting your old habits. The fourth and important point is that build self-trust deliberately. Build self-trust deliberately. One of the things for you to attain that is not just you'll say like, oh, I trust myself, oh, I'm good at this. No, you're not going to hype yourself. But what you're going to do, you're going to keep small promises consistently. If you've promised yourself that I'm going to reward myself, you're actually going to reward yourself. For you to be able to build self-trust deliberately, you will need to be faithful to yourself. You will need to be faithful to yourself. So you're going to keep small promises consistently. If you've promised yourself that 2026 you're going to pass your driver's license, you're actually going to go for that. If you've promised yourself that in 2026 you're going to go study a short course, you're actually going to go and do that. If you've promised yourself that the first semester of the year 2026, I'm going to start a business, either it works or it doesn't work, but I'm starting a business, I'll register it, I'll find a place where I'll actually sell or do my services, you're actually going to keep that promise to yourself. Because that's where it starts to build self-trust deliberately. So it's not just hyping, saying, oh, I trust myself, I'm good at this. No, you're not going to do that, because that will eventually, you'll get tired. Unfortunately, hype works with emotion, and emotions have a period in time that they work with. They're not consistent emotions. So you're going you're going to rebuild self-trust. You're actually going to know what you're good at. You're actually going to know what are your gifts and talents. And the fifth point is that you learn to tolerate discomfort. You will learn to tolerate discomfort. A lot of people are not so tolerant of comfort. You are going to learn to tolerate discomfort. Now, most people do not fear failure. They fear the emotional discomfort of growth. I'll say it again. Most people don't fear failure. They fear the emotional discomfort of growth. They fear the emotional discomfort of growth. Being a beginner, that's what they fear. Being visible, that's what they fear. Being inconsistent, that's what they fear. Being judged, that's what they fear. Because growth is not painful. Ego's death is. Imagine your ego dying. That's the most painful thing. So this year we're going to learn to tolerate discomfort. We are going to learn to tolerate discomforts. The last and final point. Change is important and change is needed. Change is important and change is needed. Success is important and success is needed. Growth is important and growth is needed. But unfortunately, to attain these three things I've just mentioned, you have to journey. And unfortunately, as I always say, this journey is not outwardly, it's inwardly. The journey is not the journey of confronting others. The journey is in confronting self. The journey is not in pointing the wrong that the next person is doing. The journey is pointing in the wrong that I am doing. So have peace. Be gradual with yourself. Do not rush yourself. Allow God to form you. Allow God to forge you. Because the real work is hard. And the real work is not how do I stop self-sabotage. That's not the real work. But the real question is what do I have to become so this behavior no longer makes sense? Who do I have to become? Who do I have to become so this behavior no longer makes sense? Who do I have to become so this behavior no longer makes sense? Because once identity shift, behavior follows without force. Once identity shift, behavior follows without force. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you subscribe, like this video, share it to everyone. Looking forward to hear from your comments. Looking to hear from you from the comments. Thank you so much.